Hello, everyone. Welcome to Transform Now. I'm Brad Hairston,
And I'm Michael Marchuk.
and this is the weekly pulse check, taking a look at what's happening out there in the world of automation and AI. Michael, let's dive right in.
Jump right in.
First article is from National News. It's titled AI Diffusion. UAE and Singapore lead the way, Microsoft says. I guess when Microsoft says it, you gotta listen.
Microsoft says, that's like Simon says.
So here's something that should make tech leaders in the world, the US, China, Russia, whoever you want to put in that category. This is something that should make them uncomfortable. So while they're building all these big frontier AI models, who do you think is actually using AI at the highest rate in the world? What does this article tell us, Michael?
Well, it just says there's lots of people using it. What's interesting to me is the disparity of the people who are using it in a language that isn't theirs. That was my first thought process. So as we look at this stuff, the article points out how a good portion of the AI usage is coming from what we would consider to be Western world countries. So the US, Canada, certainly the EU, Britain, and Australia are doing a lot of that. But as this article mentioned in the title, the UAE is also very, very heavily using AI in a bunch of different ways. And the way that this article describes it is there's a definite bias towards the English language. And we've seen this for a long time. Just the internet in general has been very biased toward English. Some of that has to do with the fact that a lot of the companies that are running operations and doing things are here in America, or in the UK or in Australia. And therefore those language tends to be stuff they're publishing a lot into. But the challenge you're having is because while that may be true, there's a huge divide, as this article says, in terms of how these tech companies are leveraging language because they are so biased toward English. And the article mentioned how just one particular language, Swahili, over 200 million people speak Swahili. And it's it's 1/500th the amount of content that's even in German, which is a portion of the content that's in English. So even though the estimates say that there's only 4 to 5% of the world's population that speaks English as a first language, more than half of the content that's available on the open web is English. So that makes it very difficult. So the idea that as these organizations are producing content and whatever, there's certainly seen a disparity between the language and that. So based on what they were showing, that there's definitely something that needs to be done in terms of being more inclusive regarding language to allow other cultures to be able to gain that expertise. Because if AI is becoming as ubiquitous as it is, and it's freely available and open, or even it's not freely, it's inexpensively available for organizations everywhere, they still are kind of locked into using English to be able to interact with it.
Well, the adoption numbers are pretty staggering. I saw in another source that nearly 60% of working age adult in the UAE and Singapore use AI tools monthly, while the US is at 26% in the same demographic. So having the technology and actually deploying it at scale are completely different challenges. So it's interesting. I wonder also if it doesn't say something about the way that they're treating AI adoption in these countries. Is it more of a top-down kind of thing versus, a bottom-up like we see mostly, in the US? I wonder if that's also
one of the other parts is, so Singapore is close to 60% also like the UAE. And so you think about these, I would say smaller in terms of geographic, but important economies that are taking this very seriously, and they're making sure that these technologies are available and that the folks within the environment can understand how to use it. So I think that's probably one of the things. We have it available in the United States, and maybe we take it too much for granted, but we're maybe not using it as effectively from an early age to be able to help guide people in their usage of AI.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to the next one. This is from Reuters. The title is AI Revives French Playwright Moliere with a New Play. So this one hits on a question that we keep talking about, it seems. It comes up over and over again. That is when AI starts creating culture, tapping into the creative segment, whether that's movies or books, or in this case, a play. And it's not just consuming data. Where's the line between the tool and the creator? And it's talking here about in France, a creative group has utilized Mistral AI to channel a famous dead playwright, probably the most famous French playwright, Moliere, who they teach in schools, and his plays are always being put on, performed. So, Michael, what are your thoughts about how they have used AI to create what they envision would be a play that he would write?
I think it's a unique way of approaching it. And I think we're seeing this sort of, I don't want to call it deep fake because it's not used the same route, but it's taking the style and influence of a particular creator and leverage it in a way that new content could be produced based on the past content that was produced. And as they were doing this with Mistral AI, which is a French large language model, they had to have folks kind of massage the output as they were doing this, because some of the output wasn't necessarily consistent from a historical standpoint or something else. But they were very pleased with the output that came out of it, because it actually exposed some things that some scholars who were very familiar with Moliere's work didn't necessarily see the patterns or the way that Moliere had put character development together. So again, that's something that AI is really good at, is doing that deep analysis to bring out insights that perhaps people wouldn't necessarily have pulled out of the data. So again, leveraging his plays as the data here to extrapolate that into a new set of content. I thought was a very unique way of doing that. But like I said before, is this a deep fake then, where we're just creating something new because we were able to mimic a style? Or is this actually something that people would be interested in because they really appreciate the way that playwright approached things? And obviously, very difficult for him to create any new plays since he died many, many, many years ago. So again, interesting concept. And it comes back to the same type of questions people have. Well, what about, if you have someone's voice from the past, or you bring a dead actor who was famous and is long dead back to life, if you will, by leveraging deep fakes? Is it really the same? Is it just, is it exploiting that particular content? In this case here, obviously, it's difficult to say you're exploiting someone who's been dead for 350 years, but the reality is that they're taking the content to create something new, or appears to be new, and people are appreciating it.
It kind of forces us to rethink what original work means. Are we gonna call this an original work, or are we gonna call it AI generated based on his previous work? Because clearly, model what is aware of and understands, Moliere's voice, and understands, how his plays are written, and the tone and the character development. So it's it's just an interesting dilemma that I think anyone in our creative realm is gonna run up against over and over and over. And I heard a great song today that my wife and I were enjoying, and I was thinking, man, what a great song. And it made me think about a song, Michael, that you created through AI that was just about as good. And, it's like, I feel bad for the artist who wrote a song, and she probably spent more time than you did, using your AI to write it. But it's like, wow, we just have this weird time we're in now where, AI can create stuff with such high quality, and we're juxtaposing that to stuff from humans, and we're like, oh, which one is worth more? Which one's more valuable? Which one should we pay attention to? So this one's weird. I do think if you have permission from like the estate or the family of a person, I'm assuming they did. Moliere's got to have relatives in France.
I'm not sure they actually consulted with anyone when they did this, because I'm not sure how you would justify saying, you're a great grandfather who created these plays. Yeah, we're gonna borrow his stuff and train and make you play out of it. I'm pretty sure they didn't ask anybody for permission on this one.
Well, yeah, the article certainly doesn't touch on it, but it seems like it would be pretty controversial if they did it. In the US, the latest example we have of this, which is far less significant than a Moliere play, but James Earl Jones, the voice of Darth Vader, his family gave permission to use his voice in a Darth Vader character that was in the video game Fortnite. And they were asked and they approved it, because they're like, if you're going to have Darth Vader, we want it to have, our relative's voice, because that he is the character. I mean, you can't do Darth Vader without his voice. So in that case, I'm like, that is really cool that they can use AI, they can emulate him, and it sounds like James Earl Jones. So there are, I think there are aspects of it that are really nice, and they kind of continue something, they continue a legacy, where something kind of has a brand around a person or something. And, but it certainly has its provocative side as well.
That it does.
All right, let's move on. Next article from Reuters. It's titled EU to delay high-risk AI rules until 2027 after big tech pushback. So it seems that the EU has blinked a little bit after all that fanfare about being the world's, AI regulatory leader. They've actually stepped back a little bit, and they are deferring some of their regulations after getting heavy criticism from big tech and also from lawmakers, saying that this was really going to hurt, Europe's competitiveness. So what do you think about this change in direction, Michael?
So to me, I would liken this to the fact that, let's assume we have a car manufacturer in one country who's making cars with seatbelts. Now, seatbelts cost extra money, but they provide for safety, and they have to be tested. So they have to be crash tested to verify or whatever. There's costs associated with that. But at the end of the day, the occupants are safer. To another country who says, we don't need to put seatbelts in the cars because it just costs more money anyway. So, I mean, if they want them, I suppose they could put them in, but we're not going to do it because it's just easier for us to make the cars, and we can get them out faster and cheaper. So you could look at that and say, well, is it more dangerous? Is it less dangerous? Well, it depends on your drive, right? If you drive safely, then you should be fine, right? The reality is that, when they started looking at this, the EU guidance was there for protecting the people using platforms, whereas the majority of the way the tech companies are positioning this would be like that auto manufacturer and the company who says, well, listen, I can do it cheaper if you just take those things out of the way. So those are both true statements. And right now, the EU, until just recently, until this came out, was very, very stringent in how they're approaching things to help protect the users of these AI platforms. So going forward, what they're saying is this is not deregulation, this is simplification. And it doesn't just address the AI ruling they had, or AI law that came out in the EU last year. This actually goes back to GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations, some e-privacy directives, the Data Act. So there's other things, other rulings, other laws that it affects as well. to help kind of pull back on some of the stringent requirements that the EU initially had, thinking that big tech will then be able to move forward and allow more innovation to happen within the European Union. As part of that, just so you know from this article, proposed changes to the GDPR would also allow Google and Meta and OpenAI and other tech companies to use Europeans' personal data to train their AI models. So all of the protections that people were counting on for their data being private, their data being protected because of GDPR, all of the protections that these organizations who are housed or do business in the European Union have taken these into account and put some very stringent protection in place to ensure that they're following those rules. And now the EU is sort of backing off on that. So it's going to make things a little messy, I think, for a while, because I understand both sides of the story, but there's going to be a time where you have to realize protections are there for a reason, and people may not necessarily be all that much in favor of having their data helping to train, at least in this case, American organizations' models, even though they may be using them in the EU.
Yeah, I think it's dressing it up a little too much to call it simplification. I think this is a bit of a retreat from their former, real stodgy position of, we're gonna hold the line. If they can't even enforce rules on traditional kind of high risk AI systems, I mean, how are they gonna handle autonomous agents when they start popping up everywhere? I mean, if I was in Europe and doing business there, I would be, scratching my head a little bit and wondering what's going on. Why are they getting bullied here by the big tech companies? That's pretty astonishing.
Yes, it is. Definitely.
All right. Next article is from AI Magazine, and it's titled IFS and Boston Dynamics Merging Agentic AI with Robotics. Now, Michael, I know you're a Boston Dynamics fan,
I
right?
love all of the physical robot mayors. Exactly.
You get a kick out of those videos showing how their physical robots interacting with humans, and then sometimes getting beaten up by humans, or they take a stick to them or whatever. Pretty humorous marketing approach there. Well, Boston Dynamics robot called Spot is now joining up with IFS. They call them an AI company. They're an ERP vendor in the cloud. Now, they have AI capabilities, but let's call it what it is. It's a very reputable ERP company, one of the first kind of cloud-based ERP companies, and they have linked arms with them to bring the physical AI together with the real world decisions, essentially in real time. So now you've got this robot who's in a warehouse or whatever, and it's taking in all this information. Well, in some cases, you need to go and get operational data to act on that, like dealing with some kind of prediction on inventory or something like that. So, ERP systems are the master of having all that data and having it organized. And so instead of a person having to go and make a query of IFS or SAP or some other system, this robot is going to have access to IFS and all the data and all the systems and what have you that it has. So now you've got something that is not only, a lot of dexterity and can do cool stuff and can fight people in the workplace, but they've also got the brains to go with it, and they can sense and decide, and they can act autonomously. So it opens up a world of possibilities, and it's certainly an interesting announcement for them. So what did you think about it?
So Based on the Boston Dynamics Spot platform, which I'm sure we've all seen either videos of their this specific type of robot or the ones like them, similar kind of models. It looks like a small dog, which is why they call it Spot.
Yeah.
And it's equipped with a number of cameras. And the ideas that they had, especially from this article, were that they were going to let these dogs roam around industrial facilities, allowing them to have access to and to review the industrial components that are just normally in use. So if you imagine these digital workhorses or dogs walking around and patrolling, if you will, they could leverage those cameras to see things and maybe identify places where predictive analytics will help them do maintenance in a better way. So, hey, we've using thermal imaging, we see that this pipe appears to be out of spec in this one area. Perhaps there's a need for review, so they could schedule, by leveraging the IFS system, schedule some maintenance to be done, or for at least that to be reviewed by humans to understand, is this truly an issue, or did we just ramp up production? That's why it's hotter in that one area than it was normally. So it does give them an additional viewpoint at being able to see more real-time information across the factory, rather than just go to the machines that have very specific sensors in particular areas right now that are measuring things. So it can see things outside of that, which humans would normally be doing. You do it, I'd let the go look at those pipes and validate that they're not corroding from the outside, because we not can visually see that versus just leveraging the temperature sensors within the liquid flow inside those pipes. So it does give them another way of doing more visual inspections. And because these Spot robots are autonomous in terms of they're given an area to be geofenced in and allow them to do this review of these very specific things, they can identify which pipe it is and go back into the IFS system and then identify that within there, say, please review this particular part of the mechanics to be able to check it for potential defects. So interesting concept. I'd be interested to see how it continues to move forward, because you can see all kinds of potential for this in other industries, taking drones, doing something similar with visuals in more real time, allowing them to be able to do things that maybe they couldn't do before with power lines or other things that are difficult to access.
Yeah, this convergence of robotics and enterprise software and autonomous decision making, it really has tremendous upside and could impact a number of industries, like you said, energy, utilities, manufacturing. The list goes on. So we'll see where this goes from here. But certainly an interesting little tidbit here about your favorite robot company out there.
Between Boston Dynamics and several others, there's a couple Chinese robot firms that are producing some amazing physical Android type robots that I am very much looking forward to seeing how they progress, because it's just a really interesting time beyond the Tesla Optimus robot to see what else is out there through this. Because again, you start putting these robots in areas where people normally are. They could go into places like 3 Mile Island and do work inside the reactor while things are operating, or they can go to Chernobyl and do cleanup activities where it would be impossible for a person to do that. But now a robot can go in there and be able to manage that kind of stuff. So interesting ideas.
Yes, sir. Our final article is a fun one, and it really wasn't fair for me to put this one on the list because it's about a show that you haven't even seen, but I've been watching it and I find it fascinating. I
imagine other people who are listening to this show have probably seen it themselves, though.
Probably so. The article the source is The Conversation, and the article is titled "Vince Gilligan's Sci-Fi Series Pluribus Taps into Our Greatest Fears About AI." Now, this one caught my attention because I am watching Pluribus, which is on Apple TV. And it's from Vince Gilligan, who wrote and directed Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, two of my favorite streaming series of all time. And this new series just came out, and it it's positioned as kind of a sci-fi, almost like a thriller, but in the style of like a Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul. It's a lot about the characters and about their personalities and how they change and things like that. This article came out, and this guy is saying this is a ominous, kind of warning. It's a narrative about the evils of AI, which I was surprised by. But Michael, based on what you've read, I know you've looked at the summaries of the Pluribus episodes that have come out so far, but based on that, based on the article, what's your take on all this?
Well, I think that the general idea behind it is that when we start leveraging AI, and this is my interpretation, we start leveraging AI and start to create using it, and I create something and you create something and someone else creates something, that all of a sudden becomes very homogenous. And I think part of that is what you're trying to get at from a series perspective, that the idea of uniqueness starts to maybe fade a little bit as we all become very, very similar in terms of the way we think, because we're going to be leveraging the similar tools to be able to do that. So while we heard earlier that, Mistral AI is being trained on Moliere's plays from the 1700s or the 1600s, it's just interesting to see that, we're looking at all the data that we have and we're training these models on it. Yet, as we're leveraging them to create our own content, a lot of it ends up being very, very homogenous. And I think that's probably the one thing that folks are concerned about. We've heard about the dead internet theory, where all this AI content is being produced, and more of it's going to be AI than human produced. Therefore, the AI content itself is going to look very similar to the other content that's being produced, which may then cause us to discount nearly all of it then.
Yeah, it's an interesting theory or an interesting take on the show. I mean, and I do get it. I understand the point that he's trying to make. It's this idea, as you said, if we let AI do our thinking for us, and we it's kind of this collective consciousness that we're all tapping into, and it's diminishing and eroding our individuality and our thoughts and our opinions and, the things that make us unique, that's a bad thing. and no one would disagree with that. And that seems to be one possible kind of motif of this show. Now, to be fair, Gilligan, and it said this in the article, he has said, I started writing this series years before ChatGPT or any of these things even existed. So he's denying that he's pointing a finger at AI. But it's hard not to think of it, especially after reading this article. Now I'm going to continue watching the series, and I'm going to have to try to crowd that out and not reach that conclusion. But anyway, it's an interesting take, and he is one of the more popular storytellers in society right now. So many people watch Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, and they won all these awards. So let's say that he is trying to build this really negative narrative around AI. It's going to have an impact on people. Now, a lot of people are already down on it, but there are people that will be influenced even by a show like this. And that could include business leaders. It could include policymakers. You never know, right? So anytime someone who has a huge following like him, writes a story completely from his perspective, if he does take a hard stance against something like that, it will have influence. So I guess that's one way to kind of wrap up the discussion here. And if you have any other thoughts on it, feel free to
I would say that we've seen enough dystopian sci-fi series now that anyone who hasn't seen any of those and now is seeing this one as the only thing they watch will notice similarities if they go back and see others. So I don't think this is anything new, but we also have seen quite a bit of positive as folks are actually using folks who are actually taking AI and leveraging it within their own use. So I'm not sure the full dystopia that all of this these films and series are showing will come to pass. Certainly not within the fictionalized ideas that we've seen, but you never know. I mean, the reality is that there are so many things that have come to pass that were fiction at one point in time and are now reality. Most of them are positive, but you just never know what that next step can be, especially since, I mean, let's be real, we're training AI and all of these things as well. So they're getting all these narratives, the plots too. So we'll see what happens as they try to outsmart us in that next, when AGI comes about.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you for joining us today on the Pulse Check. Remember, we publish another podcast every week with an amazing guest. So be sure and check that out. Otherwise, we will see you back next time on the Pulse Check. Bye for now.